Good evening and welcome to the March 28th meeting of the Town Council. If you'll kindly rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick announcements here. Official ballot voting day will be held on Tuesday, April 9th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at 3 different polling places. James Mastrocola Upper Elementary School, Merrimack Middle School, and St. John Newman Church. If you're not sure where your polling place is, you could call the town clerk's office at 424-3651, or you could also go to the New Hampshire Secretary of State's website to find your specific polling place. Our upcoming council meetings, there will be a non-public meeting on April 2nd, Tuesday at 6 p.m. in the town council chambers. Thursday, April 11th and April 25th are regular meetings of the town council at 7 p.m. here in the Matthew Thornton room. Eileen, did you have?
The voter's guide will be mailed out around March 30th. If you have a post office box, the guides will be available on the table inside the post office. This Saturday, March 30th, between 9 and 12:30, the library will be hosting the annual free computer clinic with the Michael Loverne Memorial Foundation. Call the library to make an appointment with volunteer computer experts who can help you with any technology questions you might have. The town's clerk's office would like to remind all dog owners that the 2019 dog licenses are due. All dogs 4 months and older are required by law to be licensed annually by April 30th. The town clerk's office will be open on Saturday, April 13th from 9 to noon to license dogs. The New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services will be hosting a PFAS Community Fair on Community Health Fair on Wednesday, April 3rd from 5 to 8 p.m. in the Merrimack High School cafeteria. The purpose of the fair is to respond to community concerns by providing an opportunity to meet with state agencies, local providers, PFAS experts, legislators, and advocacy groups. This is an informal event where people are encouraged to walk around and ask questions of the various participating groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. All right, is comments from the Preston Public. If you'd like to address the council, you could do it here at this desk or over at the microphone here. Seeing none. I'll move on. I was wondering, is Gigi Jennings here? Hi, Gigi. What I'd like to do without objection is move our item number 1 under new business up to move it forward so Gigi could get going home. That's the committee appointments. The council will consider appointing the Gigi Jennings as a full member to the Heritage Commission pursuant to Charter Article 4, Section 8.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Check.
Motion by Councilor Boyd, seconded by Nancy. Bill, would you like to speak to your motion?
Very briefly, I don't know Gigi, to be perfectly honest with you, so it's nice to meet you. I am a recovering title examiner as well. I put myself through college, Maine, New Hampshire, pretty much all of Massachusetts. I've done title work, so I have the utmost respect for what you do. But in the same token, it is the perfect introduction to doing the type of research that's necessary to maintain and learn more about the heritage of what makes Merrimack. So I think you bring a tremendous background to the commission, your ability to do research, both obviously in libraries, but at the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds, I think will certainly serve as invaluable. And I'm sure that Mrs. Krieger is going to enjoy having somebody new on the commission as well. So it's good to have new eyes and a new person to participate. So I enthusiastically support your nomination, and I thank the chair and who else participated in the interview for shepherding Gigi to this point. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Bill. Yes, we met about last week, I think it was. It's all a blur. And she does bring a lot to the table, and Anita was there for that interview and was very excited as well. And Tom was also.
Yep. It sounded like a great fit. I'm really happy to have her.
Very good. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 600. And because I realized it was 600, I have to tell you that Tom Thornton has been excused this evening. If Gigi, if you could come right over here. You'll have to do is raise your right hand, and if you would like, you could this right here.
Okay, just down to
Yes.
okay. Glasses. Okay. I, Gigi Jennings of Merrimack in the county of Hillsborough, do solemnly swear and sincerely swear that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent on me as a full member of the Heritage Commission according to the best of my abilities, agreeable to the rules and regulations of this Constitution and laws of the state of New Hampshire, so help me God.
Thank you, Gigi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that little detour. So we'll go back up to our regular schedule. Under recognitions, resignations, and retirements, the council would like to, Detective Scott Parks has retired, and he's not able to be here this evening, but the council wanted to present him the award in recognition of his retirement after 31 years of full-time service with the Town of Merrimack Police Department. He will be awarded a Boston Rocker, and Scott retired January 31st this year. And the Deputy Chief, Brian, if you'd like to speak to this for us.
Unfortunately, Scott couldn't be here with us tonight, but Scott worked with us for 31 years, and most of those years he served in the Detective Bureau. Scott was a very gifted police officer. He was a very talented investigator. He's what we call the closer. He was the guy that would go in for the final interview to get the confession. One of his more notable cases was a homicide case where he got the suspect to confess to killing someone. Scott was very, very loved by the PD. He was a jokester with everyone. He was an avid outdoorsman, often could be heard doing duck calls from his office, which made everyone laugh. But Scott, like I said, will be duly missed, and he actually was a huge talent to the PD. So on behalf of that, Scott's very appreciative of his recognition, and he's already enjoying his chair. So thank you.
Excellent. Peter.
Just a quick note, it was my privilege to work with Scott for many years at the PD, and I would certainly second what the Deputy Chief said. He was one of the best investigators in the state that our department had. He worked a lot of tough cases and saw him to a successful conclusion, which meant maybe some justice for the victims in many of those cases. So Scott's going to be missed. There's a big void to fill, but I wish him luck and a great future. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I agree. I've known Scott for many years. Didn't work with him, but he was really an enjoyable guy. But the problem now is there's so many young guys who are taking over the police department. I don't recognize any of them, and they all look like they're too young to be there. So.
Council to come in and visit our officers. Like I said, a bunch of great guys. So
We'll
come
have
on
to do
in,
that
we'll do a meet
sometime.
and greet. So.
Thank you, Brian.
They don't look old enough to drive.
No. It's so true. All righty. We'll move on to our first public hearing. The council will hold a public hearing to authorize the acceptance and expenditure of funds from the Abby Griffin Memorial Fund in the amount, in an amount not to exceed $17,320 for the purchase of a multi-ray light gas detection meter, an Auto-Ray 2 automatic test and calibration system, and EMS backpacks for the fire department, and for a cargo express trailer, as well as two RAD aggressor simulation training suits for the police department pursuant to RSA 31:95B and Charter Article 8, Section 15. And Chief Courier, I don't know if... Very good. I like the suit, by the way.
What's that?
That suit, it's just kind of different.
The aggressor suit you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Members of Town Council, Mr. Chairman, thanks for having me here tonight. Our request is to spend Abby Griffin money.
Brian,
Mike.
excuse me, I'm sorry, if you could make sure that's on? The green light on?
Yeah.
Oh, you just weren't close enough then, okay.
Members of Town Council, Mr. Chairman,
Hold on.
He didn't agree with you.
Just get your police voice out, and it'll be fine.
That should work now. Sorry about that.
Not at all.
All right, there you go.
Now it works.
Mr. Chairman, members of Town Council, here before you tonight for requesting the Abby Griffin funds be used for certain things that the PD could really use. The first one is used for a trailer that we would transport our two ATVs with. Currently, our trailer is basically built for a snowmobile. It's very unsafe loading and unloading the ATVs in there. It's almost like you could chop off your head if you're not careful. The trailer is 13 years old, so we definitely got the use out of it. The pistons are broken. For now, we have to put wood blocks underneath to raise the trailer to make sure it doesn't fall down on the officers. So that's the first item for $5,395. And we use our OHVs for a number of things, mainly to get on areas that we can't patrol by vehicle and make it easier rather than patrolling on foot, searching for lost hikers in Horse Hills, and et cetera. We also included some 450 for graphics to letter up the side of the trailer. And the next item that we wanted to spend the money on was two rape and aggression defense aggressor suits. We started implementing a program called RAD, Rape, Aggression, and Defense. It's self-defense for women. We have two instructors right now. We held our first class probably about a month and a half ago. And what we want to do is continue having more and more classes throughout the school year, throughout the year, and incorporating also one at the schools. We're in discussions of that right now. In order to effectively teach these classes, we have to have aggressor suits where the students can practice new skills. Obviously, no one wants to take a real punch or get kicked or anything like that, so these suits basically protect the person from the strikes. And currently, we have to rely on other departments and agencies to assist us with that, so we'd like to buy two of our own suits.
Great, does anybody have any questions? All right, thanks, Deb.
Thank you.
And we'll have Chief Courier. Yes, I didn't open it, but I will as soon as these guys are done. Actually, yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, distinguished members of the council, Madam Town Manager, Paul. This evening, we're going to bring to you some items that we're looking for the Abby Griffin Fund. And actually, the man that has all the information, I'm just here to help him out, is Assistant Chief Duke.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight to explain how we hope to use the money generously allocated to us by the Abby Griffin Fund. We're looking at three items: a replacement four-gas air monitor with PID to replace an older one that has failed and is not cost-effective to replace, an automatic testing and calibration unit to help maintain all of our gas meters in accordance with our policies, industry standards, and all the manufacturer's recommendations. Excuse me, as well as EMS backpacks to standardize the type of bag that's carried on all three ambulances, and in addition, hopefully provide a reserve pack so that all of those bags can be cleaned and decontaminated regularly. Really briefly, the meter is a multi-ray light 4-gas with PID. which basically means that it will monitor for 4 different gases that we choose, as well as having a photoionization detector to detect a wide array of dangerous gases. We use it in many different situations: CO calls, chemical incidents, odor investigation, basically to ensure the safety of the public and the responders. The AutoRay 2 automatic testing and calibration system basically provides simplified one-step testing and calibration for those meters. In order for them to work properly, they have to be properly calibrated to the gases that they're designed to detect. Now it's kind of an involved process where 1 or 2 specific people are trained to do that. This will allow a wider range of people to do it more quickly, more efficiently, and with greater standardization. And then as far as the EMS backpacks go, we're looking to standardize the bag that's carried across all of our ambulances. The bag that we currently carry is a shoulder-style bag. It's relatively bulky. The loading of it is kind of off-center, so it puts people off balance. The backpacks we found to be more ergonomic. It frees the wearers both hands for either additional equipment or to provide greater safety for them as far as keeping their balance or assisting a patient or something of that nature. The total expenditure for all of those items is $8,643, which can be fully funded by the Abbey Griffin funds. Thank you again. Any questions?
Thanks, Sid. Everybody have any questions? Peter?
If we could just, there's a lot of folks out there that aren't sure what the Abbey Griffin Fund is. If maybe we could get a very brief synopsis, the folks out there, maybe Paul or Eileen could give a brief synopsis on what that is and where the money comes from.
Abby Griffin was a longtime resident of the town of Merrimack. When she passed away, she left in her bequest in her will that so much money would be used for police and fire, that for items that are not in the budget. These are additional items for equipment for the police and fire department. There's also a portion of her bequest of her will is that it helps indigent people in Merrimack or people who cannot afford their medical bills, and that goes through the welfare department, Pat Murphy. And the third avenue of her will was left to the hospitals in the area for help with patients, inpatient care in the hospitals in the local area. So Abby Griffin has left these 3 items, and tonight, every year I get a phone call from the trustee of the Abby Griffin Fund. They tell me how much money we have to spend, and this is the interest that we're spending. So the principal remains intact and keeps rolling on from year to year. And if we don't spend the money, the interest portion that they gave us, it becomes taxable, and the IRS would be taxed on the dollars. So they encourage us to spend every last penny that we do get. The trustee has in the past.
And they also, because I think you reiterated a second point, one of those points twice, they actually do give out scholarships as well. And I think they still do it, and which is kind of nice as well. But anyhow, I was going to speak to that, but I'm glad you asked, and thank you, Paul, because when I was going to speak to it, I was going to tell you that I failed to open the public hearing, so I'm doing so at 7:19. So does anybody have any further comments or questions? Nope.
Just real quickly, how many of these gas detection meters do we have? Roughly? 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or?
4 or 5.
4 or 5, and one of them failed, and that's what we're replacing?
That's
Okay.
correct. We looked into replacing it, to repairing it, but actually the cost to repair it was greater than the cost to replace it, so yep. That's
Okay.
the way we went.
And this calibration system, we've had something in the past, I presume? So
Correct.
we're-
The system that we use now involves individually hooking the meter to a known gas sample, calibration gas, and going through a relatively involved procedure, individually each meter one at a time, to ensure that it's calibrated properly, that it's going to read, if we're monitoring carbon monoxide, for example, that it will give us an accurate reading. This machine will enable us to basically put the meter into this device. It will warm up, the operator pushes a button, and it runs through the process on its own, ensuring that we get standardized calibration across all of our meters so that there's no nuances or differences based on the operator or anything like that.
Okay. And it says in here that you do this daily, the calibration daily?
The calibration is required at a minimum every 6 months. Anytime that it's There's a couple different tests that we do. I'll go back to that in a second. Calibration specifically is required at a minimum every 6 months, or any time that the meter may be exposed to an unknown gas that may alter the way the sensor works. It's designed to meter a certain chemical. If you expose it to certain other ones, it can throw that sensor out of whack. So it would have to be recalibrated at that point. There's a fresh air test that's done daily, where we turn it on, allow it to warm up, and we sample normal ambient air and ensure that the meter is reading what we know the ambient air should be. And that if that test produces an error, say we're in clean air and it reads a either elevated or lowered oxygen level or an elevated carbon monoxide level, that would be an indicator that it would need to be calibrated at that point.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the info.
Very good. All right, if anybody would like to address the council related to the Abby Griffin Fund request, you could stand up to the mic here, stating your name and address.
For both police or fire.
Yes, and seeing none, I don't remember what time I opened the public hearing.
7:19.
So
Mr. Chairman.
7:21, I'll close the public hearing. Thank you.
Mr.
And
Chairman, I
pleasure of the
move-
council. Bill?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the town council authorize the acceptance and expenditure of funds from the Abby Griffin Memorial Fund in the amount of, but not to exceed, $17,320 for the purchase of a multi-ray light gas detection meter, an Auto-Ray 2 automatic test and calibration system, and EMS backpacks for the fire department, and for a cargo express trail, as well as 2 RAD aggressive simulation training suits for the police department pursuant to RSA 31:95-B and Charter Article 8-15, and that furthermore, that the town manager or her proxy be authorized to sign any paperwork necessary to perfect the acceptance and expenditure.
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Peter. Motion by Councilor Boyd, seconded by Councilor Albert. Any further discussion on your motion?
It sounds like we're going to be talking more about the Abby Griffin Fund over the next couple of months, about some of the purposes based on the conversation that we had with Chris Christensen at our last meeting. So it's kind of good to have this. 2 weeks ago, didn't Chris Christensen talk to us, or a month ago?
Different, not the, Shed Harris,
Shed Harris. I apologize.
I believe.
But he's the trustee of the trust funds, which manages this, so I should clarify that, and I apologize. But the point that I'm getting at is that this is just one particular example of where we've saved through the generosity of people in our community, and we're putting it to good use for a specific need. So I want to thank Chris and members of the trust fund for their continued stewardship of the trust funds to make this happen tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain, 600. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Next item on the agenda, a public hearing. The council will hold a public hearing to receive input on a group petition received pursuant to Charter Article 10-1B. The petition is to add to the majority of New Hampshire towns and cities that offer tax exemption for solar panels and renewable energy productions and wood heating energy systems for 100% of the assessed value. Here this evening is Amanda Heiberger here. Hi, Amanda. This year, the town didn't receive the petition. I just want everybody to be aware, because maybe not everybody is. We received the petition too late to get it on this year's warrant for a town meeting. And so, but we're required to have a public hearing within a prescribed amount of time set by the town charter, and so that's why we're doing it today. So, welcome, and please.
Okay, well, thank you for listening to my petition and for everyone here today. My biggest reasoning for submitting this petition is my concern for the environment. And I know everyone is fully aware of climate change and that we've been talking about this for decades. New Hampshire actually has a goal to have 25% of all electricity sold in the state to come from renewable energy sources by 2025. And as of 2017, 20% came from renewables. So we're close. My concern with having the solar panels taxed is that it hinders people from putting solar panels on their property. And I've heard several citizens of Merrimack state that very fact. And part of the cost is not just installing it, but it's the maintenance and the taxes on it that occur every year. And some people find the added tax burden for solar panels just that much where it's not worth their while to put on. And that hurts the environment because you have people that are, instead of going for renewable energy, they're relying on the non-renewables that emit carbon dioxide, that contribute to greenhouse gases, that are contributing to global climate change, which contribute to the increase in severe storms that we see not only in New Hampshire, but throughout the country and throughout the world. And our actions have impacts not only on us in Merrimack and not only on us in New Hampshire, but on the world. And so even if it's just us in New Hampshire and just in Merrimack making this little bit of a difference, it's going to positively benefit people worldwide. There are 135 towns currently doing some sort of tax exemption in New Hampshire. Of those communities around us that have 100% assessed value exception, those towns include Brookline, Derry, Goffstown, Mason, Mount Vernon, and Nashua. Other towns nearby that have some sort of exemption include Bedford, Hollis, Londonderry, Pelham, and Wyndham. So if you're a environmentally friendly person or looking to buy a house, those towns are probably going to look a little more attractive and keep potential good people from coming to Merrimack. And right now we have about 85% of the world's energy coming from non-renewables. And again, New Hampshire is a small state, and Merrimack's just a small town within New Hampshire. But we could be leaders and show that our climate and our future is important to us. So I'm hoping that you guys will consider this petition, and hopefully in the future it will be addressed and we can make a positive contribution for the climate and our children and our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Do you have a moment? Does anybody have any questions or Bill?
Yeah, very quickly, thank you very much for your testimony and your petition. Do you currently have solar panels on your home?
I do.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Peter?
I think the number was dug up, but if today we went to 100%, if we stopped, I guess I want to say it is, if we didn't take in the solar panels on evaluation, how much would that affect the tax base totally with all the?
Currently,
Yes.
$2.6 million
Okay.
in value.
In value.
So $2.6 million in value is,
70.
you know,
It's $2,631,400
I
using the
said.
2018 tax rate of $24.12 per thousand. The town collected around $63,000 in taxes.
63?
63
Okay.
from Tracy Doherty, the administrative assessor.
Okay. Anybody have anything further? Nope.
is the assessed value,
Of the properties, yes, sir.
and the tax impact's only 63,000.
Yes. Barbara?
So I know that there are two ways that you can have solar panels on your house. One is that you lease the panels, and the other is that you buy the panels. Is that correct?
As far as I know, yes.
And what happens if you lease the panels and you're selling your house? Does that person pick up the contract that you had with, or does that work differently?
I bought mine, so I'm not familiar with the process of leasing.
Okay.
We're going to have an opportunity for everybody to come up. I just wanted Amanda to,
And we probably
with her
want to,
presentation.
you probably
have
want to hear the
everybody
same,
have a
you know,
chance.
someone who can speak
So-
to the other side as well.
Yeah, so if you can speak to that when you have your opportunity, we'd love to hear it.
So what happens if you are producing more electricity than you need? Are you selling that back to, say, Eversource or some other company?
Yes, but my electric company will not give me a check. So I essentially will reduce my costs, but I still have to pay the delivery fee, and I don't get a check back. and I don't
So you
understand.
don't pay for usage, you just pay for the meter and
Yes.
to deliver the power?
Yes.
But that's using it.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Nancy?
I just want to verify, you know this is not going to be on the ballot
Yes.
because it's late. When were you notified that you were too late?
I wasn't actually. I called the town and they told me I had 3 or 4 days to get it in, and I got it in by the deadline I was told. And this is the first time I'm being told that it was too late for the ballot, although given the date of this hearing, I kind of figured that that was too late.
All right, because I checked and I was told, you were told earlier. Is that right, Paul?
We had a conversation. We had a conversation when I told you that it was going on a public hearing, that it would not be on this year's ballot.
Then I apologize. I must have misunderstood.
I just want to make sure that you know and the audience knows
Mhm.
that it's not tonight, that it was known ahead of time.
Okay. And is it off the ballot for being considered for future?
No.
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 Oh, of course
Okay.
not.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I would encourage you to. When this came up 2 years ago, we had a large gathering as well, and Gad had a lot of information. That's the only reason I know, Barbara, because a lot of the information, questions you're asking are reasonable questions, and they'll be clarified again. But at that time, I remember encouraging people to do it. My personal philosophy is I think is environmentally appropriate as well.
Mhm.
Personally, I would support that. But I do only believe it should be on the ballot because the other people in town are going to help support that. Now, I would vote to support it because that's my philosophical feeling. But that was the discussion, and that's why we said, please do a petitioner warrant article, and we would back that. I think and that was the encouragement of the town council. So when I saw it, I was happy, and I was sort of, it's too bad it's late. But I would encourage you to also, would she have to redo it, or?
Yes.
Okay. So unfortunately.
And do you mind if I would strongly recommend that you come into my office and I'll help you. So you want to start a little bit earlier. You come in my office and I'll help you, walk you right through the process, okay?
And make sure the language is correct, because that makes a big difference, too.
Yes.
That's all I wanted to make sure that you knew.
Thank you, Nancy. Peter?
I believe that there was a couple of folks who had the answer to the leasing of the. if
Yeah,
they
what we're
wanted
going to do,
come up-
when you're all set with
Public
Amanda
hearing.
and her presentation, everybody will have an opportunity. So are you all set?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes.
I do have a question. I know that having a tax exemption on solar panels will increase the tax burden, but I do know that there are new apartments being built in Merrimack and other new building projects, basically, and this will increase revenue. So you get that, and you also have property values continually increasing. How much of a long-term offset is this to change the structure? And I know that in New Hampshire, property taxes are the only source of income for the towns in the state, which makes it difficult. But at the same time, we need to think progressively and think long-term and not just short-term.
Sure. No, that's very true. We do have at least one commercial property that has a very large solar array set up, which is a substantial value, and I want to say it was $8 million, but I don't recall. Whatever, I'm not sure what it is offhand. But those type of things will make it a greater impact and so on, which is why, as Nancy had suggested, I concur with her that I'd love to see it on the ballot, and that way the town would have that opportunity to have their say in it. But, so, Nancy?
The only thing I would recommend is if you do a 100% total exemption, I don't think it's going to pass. If you set 100% up to a certain cap, I think you would.
Okay.
Because that really takes care of residential, for example, but any large corporate, it would be exempt up to a certain cap, and then beyond that. So just keep that in mind when you rewrite it and you meet with the town manager. I would recommend you do that because I think it's going to be much more palatable to people.
All right. And just out for my own curiosity, is there any plans to eventually put solar panels on Merrimack Town buildings and schools, which would save your electric building and cut town expenses?
We actually, I don't think we've ever had that conversation, but
Actually, I was going to correct you, Mr. Chairman. We have had
We
that
have. I
conversation
didn't
back
even-
when I first
had
came on the
goals?
council. Back in 2011, 2012, we had that conversation.
Oh, gosh. Okay, that explains it. Now I'm 62, I don't remember that far back, I guess. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
For jogging my feeble memory.
Not a problem, Mr. Chairman.
Barbara, did you have something for Amanda?
Yeah, just what Nancy was saying is that there is no one rate for commercial versus residential. It's either or, and it applies to everyone. But I guess my question is for Eileen. Eileen, how early should she start this process? Because I don't want her to, you know what I mean, get stuck in this again.
Yeah, December, January would be good to start collecting your signatures again. And you come in first and we'll get the wording, right? And then you can go out and get your signatures and we'll get them back and so that the town clerk can review, make sure that they're registered voters.
Okay.
So right around January, I think.
And how long is the petition good for? So, because this one won't do it because it's a year away, is that?
Yeah, you're tricking me on the fly here. I don't
Sorry,
know the answer to that. I'm
sorry.
You know?
I guess it's
90
a statute,
days.
90 days. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, all set? Thank you, Amanda.
All right, thank you.
If anybody would like to address this, you could, please, I'm sorry. I'm opening the public hearing at 7:37. I normally try and do that earlier. There we go.
I'm the worst one.
Thank you, Nancy. If you would like to address the council on this, Jackie, you could have a seat here, as you know, or you could also further use that mic if you'd like when you come up. Hi, Jackie. And you do have to state your name and address for the record.
Jackie Flood, 6 Shore Drive, the one with the solar panels on it.
Jackie, there you go.
Okay, Jackie Flood, 6 Shore Drive. I'm going to address more the whole idea of assessment tonight. We know that it has good environmental, or no impact, should I say. But I just want to say, as a real estate broker, 40 years selling real estate in this town, that I did hundreds of market opinions on houses and was very familiar with that, with how they arrive at value and so forth. Never in the history of the marketplace has any home improvement ever been valued more than the cost of doing it. You put a new kitchen in, don't think you're going to get 50 grand back, you're not, with the exception of maybe landscaping. So right there, this is faulty, because we've been assessed for higher than we paid. We could have paid, we are leasing ours, but we could have had them for $15,000. We were assessed that first year at 30, which is twice what it theoretically cost us, which was actually nothing. So we were expecting a savings of $400 a year to do the right thing. It's all right. But our taxes now, based on a $20,400 assessment, cost us $492 in taxes. So we pay $100 more for the privilege of having homely solar panels on our roof. That doesn't make sense either, and I don't like the privilege of having to do that. And so right there, it's to me, an assessment that shouldn't have been done, that we're not asking so much for an exemption, in my view, but to bring it down to where it's supposed to be, which is nothing. If I had a fancy furnace in the basement, if I have a private septic system that costs us very, very lot of money instead of town sewer, I have a private well, I'm not assessed at those. Why would I be assessed at another utility? It's generating electricity. Instead of Eversource, we have our solar panels. And so it's just a utility, and I don't see why it's worth a thing. Because if somebody knocks on my door and wants to pay me money for my house, they're not going to pay a dime more for those solar panels, I would assume. I don't think, and by the way, there's no market data. So right there, that's another reason why an assessment is faulty, if it doesn't have any data to shore it up. So to me, it's really just a no-brainer, that this is not just asking for an exemption, it's really to bring it down to where it's supposed to be.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Ben Niles,
Oh,
11 Fernwood
hi,
Drive.
Ben. Oh, is it off?
Sorry, Ben Niles, 11 Fernwood Drive. I've spent my whole career of 40 years in mortgage finance and housing, and I couldn't agree more with what Jackie said relative to assessed values. When you appraise a property for fair market value, if you don't have the comps to support it, the max you use is cost, okay? So the assessing it at some number that could be, as Jackie says, double the cost, makes no sense. We're not trying to assess an income stream from the solar energy process generated on that rooftop array. These are residential properties, they're not income-producing properties. So you should not be ascribing a value based on an income potential, okay? So I would definitely encourage the town to review their assessment practices and the determination of value now, given that this petition, which a lot of it I do support, even though I don't have solar in my house, but this petition won't happen for real until, you know, a year down the road, a year plus. Now, having said that, I just have one point I'd like to make, and if you can make a mental note of it for when the petition comes back for real, and that is that when you look at wood heating systems, my understanding is wood produces more carbon into the air than coal. So this is not what I would consider environmental friendly solution, okay? Europe has taken and closed many, you know, Germany, France, et cetera, of their coal plants, even though they have coal scattered all over Europe. And they've gone to cutting down their woodlands and burning wood. And guess what? Europe's CO2 emissions and carbon emissions have gone up, not down. They're failing the Paris Accords miserably. So if I'm right that wood burning puts more carbon in the air, then I would highly recommend that that portion be removed from the warrant article when it gets that far, because that is not the direction we want to go from an environmental standpoint. It's not the concept that it's anything renewable, but it's renewable at the same time it's environmentally friendly, and that it reduces the emissions.
I think, Mr. Niles, that in the statute that allows for this exemption, it includes that in that language. And it's not just a regular wood stove.
But we don't have to follow the statute, do we?
No, I suppose we don't.
Yeah,
No.
I thought you
Point
had to.
taken. I'm not sure. I'm not sure enough to say, have an absolute.
I wouldn't
know
think
the
so.
answer
I
to
mean,
that?
that's,
Yes, you
That-
can select different ones.
yes,
So
I mean,
you can
that's a
make
state law,
reference.
and it's like an enabling legislation. But
Right.
you don't
There
have to
are-
incorporate
There
all
are
of it.
3 different kinds. So there's
Mhm.
solar, there's wind, and then there's wood burning. So you could select all of them, select 1, select 2, whatever.
Okay.
It's just a matter of the wording of the thing. That's why I thought it would be a good idea for somebody to come in and talk to me.
Yeah, okay, understood. Okay, that's my remarks. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
You gotta get in line.
Oh, you could, if you'd like, sit there.
You can sit down.
Halfway there.
Try.
No.
Oh,
2.
There.
Okay, one more time. Gina Rosati, 15 Dunbarton Drive. I do not have solar panels. I wish I had solar panels, but if there's going to be, I wasn't even aware that there was a tax. And I can tell you right now, Mr. Rosati would extend on the solar panels, knowing that there's a tax. That said, I am curious if in 2017, when you voted on this, did it have to be voted on by the town, or was the town council able to make that decision to exempt on their own? Did they have the power to do that?
Yeah, the council can, in fact, do that. We can submit an ordinance and make it happen right here. For me, because it is coming off the rolls, it's something I think the town should participate in, my own opinion. That's why I've said that, and Nancy had mentioned it earlier as well.
We did not take a vote. We gathered information. It was a topic of discussion. We had the assessor here who addressed the questions, exactly what you brought up. What is it based on? Where did you get the information? Those are the kind of things we addressed before, which we can do again. I'm not saying we shouldn't. But at that point, the council at that time, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, encouraged those people interested who were there at the meeting to do a petition warrant article, which we would support. That we didn't want to do it. We thought the voters within the town should make the decision.
Was that in 2017?
2 years ago, right?
Yes,
So in
I'd say it was-
2017, we voted to tax?
No.
Okay.
We encouraged the petitioners to write a warrant article to be put on the ballot.
To
We
exempt.
wanted the citizens to vote
Right.
on it.
To exempt.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
But we wanted the people, the petitioners, to do it. We encouraged them to do it.
And they did not, so now we
Correct.
have
Until
that.
now.
Okay,
Until now.
all right.
Tom?
I just want to point out real quickly that I'm hearing people talk about a tax on solar panels. There isn't a tax on solar
No.
panels.
Thank you.
There is a property tax assessment. Because your solar panels are thought to increase the value of your property, the value of your tax goes up. Just like my fireplace is thought to increase the value of my property, even though I never use it. Therefore, I'm taxed $300 a year for having that.
Yeah, I guess
So
I-
added to the property value. So it's not a solar panel tax. It is a property assessment that includes the added value of the solar panels on the house.
Yeah, and I guess I have a hard time understanding why if some of these solar panels are leased and not even owned, but I guess that's a conversation for a different time. Okay. Anyway, that said, I'll add one more 2 cents, is that I would hope that Merrimack would, as we are the only one, along with Bow, that is not giving any type of exemption at all. I would love to see Merrimack be a little greener. We have the landfill. We could have solar panels up there.
We're not the
I'm reading.
That's not accurate.
Okay, well, then you might want to call the Telegraph and let them know that they're not being accurate. However,
The only reason I'm saying that is that was a data point 2 years ago. We wanted every single town, whether they gave an exemption or not, if they did, what was the percentage of the cap? Now, obviously, there might be changes from 2 years ago, but there was a significant amount of towns that did not do anything, and there were probably, and I think someone said earlier, 7 or 8 towns that were 100%. Most of them were percentages with caps.
and that's understandable, especially where
Exactly right.
Fidelity just put in a whole field full of solar
Exactly right.
panels, which
But
I'm sure
that's what you're saying is inaccurate. The Nashua Telegraph is inaccurate.
the Nashua Telegraph then is inaccurate. Okay, but
Unless things have changed a lot since 2017.
well, and I would hope that there will be groups up here in the future that will be asking for solar panels on top of the town dump and, maybe some hydro in the Merrimack River. So it would be wonderful if Merrimack could do some things that would be a little greener, because I do think that with people coming into town and we want young families in here, they're going to want green. So, thank you.
Thanks, Gina. Good evening. Perfect. Perfect.
There we go. So Natalia Bayramova, 26 Crosswoods Path. I have several points, so I try to not be too long. I don't know if you remember me, I was here 2 years ago. So I will bring some points from that discussion and some new ones. So overall, as Amanda said something about certain people being environmentally friendly or not, I think we should all be environmentally friendly because the state that the planet is right now is, not great. So anything we can do, each person should be environmentally friendly. Solar is just only one part of something we could do. There's plenty of things. And guys, all the plastics are being banned finally. So we really should kind of look into ourselves and kind of like our conscience and really think, do we want to do this? Do we really want to discourage solar right now? So that's a big point. Now, quick points. I do own solar. Well, actually, I lease. So I will answer that question about the lease. So as I brought up 2 years ago, the big difference between leasing and owning, whoever leases doesn't get any tax incentives, like at all, nothing at all. The advantage of leasing is when you do it, you don't pay anything. Solar City came, put them on, I paid nothing. They, if anything's wrong with them, I actually had a bit of an issue last year. They came, they fixed it, I paid nothing. So there's no costs up front, so that's the advantage. Also, there's some people would say, oh, didn't you know you're going to be paying taxes? Well, you should pay more attention when your contract was up. Yeah, well, I did pay attention, and in the contract it actually says that property taxes are included in your rate. I'm not a lawyer, that's what it says. I don't know what that meant. I still don't actually know what it means. So supposedly, when I looked at it, I am paying taxes because I am paying for electricity. I'm just selling it back to Eversource. So in terms of what happens if I move, I have two options. I can have someone, the new owner, just take over like they would if I had a Eversource, account. Or I can take my solar panels, pay $500, and they will take it, and the Solar City, because it's Solar City's panels, they will install them in your house. So, important point for this particular discussion. So when I move, I'll take my solar, and that tax goes with me. So when we're saying like, oh, other people are paying for you, it's not a pool. You can't take a pool with you, but I can take my solar. And another thing, now that people know their tax, so originally I thought, oh, of course, a smart, environmentally friendly person would love to take on solar from my house, so I don't have to worry about moving it. Well, now the smart person say, no, lady, your solar panels are being taxed, so I don't want them. I don't want to buy this house if you have the solar panels. So the value, if you say it's up, it's going to go down, if I move. So that's about leasing versus buying. Also, when people say, how come other residents have to pay for your solar because you want solar? We all know it's give and take. Some older residents don't have children in school, but they pay for schools. My children used to be in Merrimack School, now they're not. I'm paying, I don't mind, because it's give and take. You pay for something you don't use, you don't have a fire in your house, but you pay for the fire department, it's all good. So that's to that point. As you can see, I have several Facebook discussions on this subject. Another thing, just some people talk about insurance. I'm wrapping up.
No, take your time. Take your time.
I just recently switched home insurance, and I was waiting for them to actually ask me about because they asked if I had a pool, if I had, I can't remember, something else extra. Nobody asked if I had solar panels. So when people say, oh, there's your insurance, it's not your house is going to be more risky because your insurance is going to be, no. Nobody even, when they redid my policy, there was no question about panels at all. So just that point. And the last, I know you guys just said it's too late, and this is the third year I participated in this discussion. So the first year, seemed like it was just informational meeting. You guys were going to maybe look into it, and I guess I misunderstood. I thought by looking into it, it's actually going to be on the ballot. It wasn't. Then last year, I signed another petition, or actually a couple of them, I think, and then I caught this on TV, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. There was a gentleman with some sort of a petition, and there was some sort of an issue with it that either not enough signatures, I don't know what the issue was, but like that, again, it ended up being too late. Then you guys actually voted to put it on the ballot, and then you deliberated, and after the deliberation, there was some question asked, and and you can correct me if I'm wrong. You guys remember that better than I do. There was some wording, well, I hope. There was some wording, the wording was, you weren't sure exact wording to put on the ballot, and so the decision was like, well, it's really kind of like a rushed. We can't just like come up with the right wording right on the spot. So I can't remember who the vote was, but the person took that vote away, and it didn't end up being on the ballot. So my thing is, it's the third year. It's always too late. And this year, again, I saw the petition, I signed it, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be great. Then I actually talked to Amanda, and she told me the meeting's on, and I'm like, well, if I'm guessing correctly, that's gonna be too late. So my question is, what does need to be really done for it not to be too late? Why, and I'm just addressing everybody, why can't you be a little bit more proactive? I get that it has to be on the ballot, but it sounds, again, I don't know all the inner works, but it sounds like it has to be a petition, but it also sounds like it doesn't have to be a petition, that you guys can actually put it on the ballot as a town council, I don't know, suggestion or whatever it is. So my thing right now, I will try again next year to sign another petition, and maybe we'll talk to someone and if, make sure it's not too late. But I also want to encourage you to look into it a little bit more deeper and maybe put it on the ballot without the petition. I don't know how it works, but, so, to wrap this up, 3 points. Taxing solar is wrong. You can call it whatever you want. It's taxing. Taxing, it's wrong. Taxing leased panels is doubly wrong. And not put it on the ballot for a third year is like triply wrong. I'm done.
Thank you, Natalia.
Unless you have questions.
Hi.
Tom Atkins, 24 Amherst Road. I also lease my solar panels. I use a different company called Sunrun. So I actually wish that I had the ability to take my solar panels with me. I don't. But one thing that I've noticed that all of us who lease have kind of danced around this. When you lease the solar panels, you do not own them. So how can we be taxed on something we don't own? Because it's fixed. Well, it's not fixed to the real estate. Because if Sunrun, at the end of my term, I can then choose to have Sunrun come out and remove them, and it goes back to Sunrun.
As Tom had suggested earlier, it's not a tax on the panel. It's a value of your home. And according to the town assessor, the value of your home increases when you have solar panels, and that's how that number comes
But
up.
I don't have solar panels. Sunrun does.
Your house
No,
does.
but your house.
My
right.
house may do, and they may be parked on the house at the moment, but I don't own them.
No,
I
no,
don't have
fair.
any responsibility for them.
Right, but no, it's if you were to sell your home with those panels on it, the value of that home is greater because of those panels.
But that's not true either.
I'm just telling you what our town assessor says.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I think what a lot of us are saying is your assumptions are not correct. And so what it boils down to is even though it's a property valuation assessment,
Yep.
it ends up being a tax. And that's what it ends up coming out as.
Okay.
And we get that, and that it's
Yeah.
not meant to be that way or that we're using outdated information of some sort. But when we're leasing and we don't own them, at 20 years they go back to the company if I don't buy them outright.
Right.
And if I can't remove them when I move, or as far as I can't take them with me, it goes back to the company or somebody else has to take them. There's not a ownership aspect to that should be, and I understand I'm going to use this word again, I'm sorry, it shouldn't be the tax. And that's where it comes across to us who have them as an impediment to doing this more.
I mean, on the plus side, the reason most people, I think, do solar panels is because it is green. And
You see, I didn't. I did it for the monetary.
Oh, you did?
Because
Okay.
I was able,
All right.
because, so,
Fair enough.
as much as I like green, for me, I actually now control my electric costs because I have a set payment for the next 20 years. I don't have to worry about Eversource increasing 15%. I don't have to worry about, where are they getting their power from? I know where it's coming from. And I don't know about your true-up. We do have the ability to do a true-up from Eversource. You just have to hit a monetary value. All right, but that monetary value is based upon the generator's pay, not the consumer pay. So instead of being 18 cents for your supply charge, it's a penny and a half.
Yeah, the
per
wholesale,
kilowatts.
yeah.
So it's a wholesale payment.
Right.
So monetarily, it made a whole lot more sense for me to do it, because when I did the math, my payment for the next 20 years is set. I don't have to worry about it. But when you add my tax on, now it's, all right, well, that tax, if it's a value-add tax, that's going to go up every year because you're adding value, because you're not getting those payment increases from Eversource. So it adds to the cost burden. So as much as I love being green, please don't take me the wrong way. Monetarily wise, it made a lot of sense. And I think a lot of us, if it didn't make monetary sense, no matter how green it is, it wouldn't make sense for us to put on our homes. So just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
I'm Chris Cope from Mount Vernon, and I'm here at the immigration.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, can we hear from people from Merrimack first before we? This is a public hearing for the town of Merrimack, and I would respect that we honor the citizens of the community that have come here to present testimony to us. It's not that I don't want to hear from Mr.
Understood.
Cope, but regretfully, he's not a member of our community, and I would
Correct.
prefer to hear from somebody.
I was invited by Mary Beth Raven, but I'm happy to defer.
I don't.
It's your prerogative, Mr. Chairman.
Pardon me?
I think we plan to hear everybody.
Yes, and we will, with that, as long as I don't hear an
I'll keep it
uproar.
short.
Please, thank you, Chris.
All right.
What was your last name? I'm sorry.
Last name is Kolb, K-O-L-B as in boy.
Thank you.
I'm here as a co-president of the Hillsborough County Area Renewable Energy Initiative. We're a nonprofit volunteer organization.
Can you pull the mic closer?
Yeah,
please?
we're a volunteer nonprofit organization that tries to make solar more affordable for homeowners by helping them to do it themselves. And when I look at this, when I look at solar, really there's 2 reasons that our members are interested in solar. The number 1 reason is economics. It's because they can save a little bit of money. And the second is because it's good for the environment, good for the world. You know, distributed solar generation, that's what the utilities call what we do, is distributed generation. It's, you know, it's good for the world. A typical system you'd put on a small house here in Merrimack might be something like 5 kilowatts. And that would be the equivalent of planting about 200 trees a year. So in the 20-year lifespan of that system, it's like planting 4,000 trees. It's good, you know, as a carbon savings. It's clean energy. It's also good economically, and it's not just good for the people whose roof it's on. You know, the utilities right now are discussing of time of use rates and how to incentivize storage and other things in the network. And the reason for they're doing that is because a good portion of their costs are transmission costs, and those come out of the peak usage that occurs during heavy loading. And the peak usage and heavy loading in New Hampshire, the heaviest days are our heavy air conditioning days in the summer. And solar offsets those costs. So there's a major benefit to the utilities for having these solar arrays on the grid. And it reduces the cost not just for the people who have the systems on their homes, but for everyone who's using the utility. And that money is returned to the ratepayers under the way our system works under the Public Utilities Commission. So it's good for the environment. It's good economically. Taxes affect behavior. When you look at a tax, part of what's important about public policy is incentivizing the behavior that you want to see. The tax, including the solar panels and the valuation of the home, the way it's done in Merrimack, disincentivizes solar, and it does it fairly strongly. The economics of residential solar in New Hampshire are not great. It's fairly marginal, and that's one of the reasons that our organization exists. A typical bid rate is about $3 a watt for putting solar up on a roof. What that means is that when you look at the, you know, taking on a project like this, a homeowner would be looking at putting in somewhere in the area of $21,000 to put something up on their roof, or $11,000 for a 5 kilowatt system. I'm sorry, I've got a couple different numbers in my head. But when we look at the return on that, it can return about 7%. But if you look at Merrimack's tax, it's going to take about 25 to 30% of the return value that's coming from the electric savings right off the top. So it changes something that was going to, you know, earn 7% down to something that's earning under 5. So you can't even finance this on a home equity loan and expect to break even. You'll be underwater a couple $100 in a home equity loan. And for people who do a PPA that we've heard about, that's the lease agreement. I would be very surprised if they're getting quoted rates where they're breaking even on their electric, as opposed to, we expect them to be able to save. What we do with our members, we do buying materials and group savings and then doing barn raisers to put them up on the roof. It's a very Yankee thing. Cheap, cheap, cheap. And it's a great system, but in Merrimack, we don't get any participation. We go all over Hillsborough County. We put in 40 systems in the last 5 years. There was one done in Merrimack, and it was done before he understood the tax consequences. We haven't done any since. So, the people who want to get into this deeply and understand the numbers, aren't doing it in Merrimack. So, that's kind of the result of what's the consequence of the tax, the way you're doing it. If we look at other towns around us, we've done 40 systems in the last 5 years in other towns in Hillsborough counties. There are no other towns in Hillsborough County where there's currently tax dollars collected on rooftop solar. There are a number of towns where it's specifically exempted in the bylaws, and there's other towns where they simply ignore it. But nobody else is collecting taxes in Hillsborough County. The other thing is Bedford is the other town that does assess value. They assess a value of $300 a panel. So that would say that your assessment, being twice what Bedford's is, your next door neighbor, is high. Nicely, Bedford immediately turns around and exempts that income, or that value from taxing. So while they do attribute a value to it, half of what Merrimack contributes, they place no tax burden. So in closing, I think the way you're taxing solar and residential solar in Merrimack is a disincentive. It makes something that's marginal economically to begin with underwater for almost anybody who doesn't do it themselves. And even for the people who do it themselves, it makes the payoff twice as long. It takes this concept of increasing your home value out of the equation, because really the value of a solar system is not that it's pretty, it's not that it makes the snow fall off your roof, it's that it saves you money on your electric bill. And in Merrimack, it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask you a question? You may know the answer to this. That's why I'm going to ask you
All
this
right,
question.
I may not, though.
You certainly know more than me. Are there still federal tax incentives for solar?
Yes, there are. When you put in a
Okay.
solar system, there's a 30% off the top on all the expenses it takes in order to do that.
Okay, so
And that's
if you
this
in
year,
fact
next year it's
own...
26, then down
so-
to 22.
So if in fact you own the panels...
Correct.
You're able to use that. If
Correct.
you're leasing, the company who's doing the leasing gets it.
Correct.
Okay. That was my
But
understanding.
when I did the financial analysis and I looked at this in terms of the payment, I took that federal immediately off the top, assuming that the homeowner did not have to come up with that. Because that's what we put into our financial models. We put in a 30% federal incentive and then a $1,000 incentive from the state of New Hampshire for any system 5 kilowatts or larger.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So you did know it.
That
And
one
just-
I know. And you want to throw me a harder one?
And just to let you know, no, this is for general. See, they were prepared. Remember we were talking about how the National Telegraph, now this is 2017, so it may be different now. But of the 259 towns in New Hampshire, 89 offer exemptions. All the rest do not. Okay, again, it might be different now, and there are varying combinations.
Yeah,
But
again, there's
I
a
should send
there's
this
a
to the
difference
National
between
Telegraph.
an exemption on the books and actually collecting taxes, because a number of towns in Hillsborough, most of the towns in Hillsborough County, don't have formal exemptions on the books. They just don't acknowledge the value as part of the tax base.
Okay, fair.
George Heavner, 29 Brienne Drive in Merrimack. Okay.
They applauded for the gentleman, so I guess it was okay.
Okay. Let me just address one comment to the realtor who said she doesn't like the ugly solar panels. I kind of like them because it tells me here's somebody who cares. Okay. Anyway, you have talked about the fact that this is increasing the assessment, the value of the property. let me just go through a personal case to show you why I don't think this is necessarily the case. Okay. My wife and I put solar panels on our house about 5 years ago. We have 36 panels. It cost us $47,500. We own them outright. The year after we put them on, our assessment went up $80,000. At the tax rate, that is about $1,800 a year more. Okay. Now, our electricity bill did go down. We were averaging about $150 a month, which I'll call it $1,800. Okay. We now pay about $13.08 a month, and this is line charges for power going the other way. Okay. So we're saving about $1,800 a month, which all goes a year. Sorry, thank you. $1,800. I wish it was a month. We're saving about $1,800 a year, which goes to pay the tax bill. Now, if you argue this has increased the value of the house, the value would be when somebody's going to buy the house. Now, if we are saving $1,800 and giving you $1,800, then I would argue that anybody that has passed high school math knows that the value of the house really hasn't increased because of the solar panels. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Let's see if this is on. My name is Eric Saunders, Eric Street.
Very
I
good.
live on Eric Street in Merrimack. I'd love to talk to you about fireplaces. They shouldn't be on the assessment either, but that's not why we're here. The state has allowed for the exemption, but I'm not here to talk about my photovoltaics either. I'm here to talk about my water heater, which happens to have a pipe to my roof, which I get taxed on. I have 2 solar thermal panels on my roof, which I've been taxed on since 2011 for having a water heater. No one else is taxed by the type of water heater they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Rob Link, One Crestview Circle. I wanted to start off with a question. So we're talking about needing to get it on the ballot. It's kind of a long process. We need to get the, a petition going, all that again. I was wondering, was there anything on a ballot or a vote to make it so that the panels are getting taxed?
No, it's all on the value of your home, and what they do is, there was suggestion there were no comparables in Merrimack, and I don't know if that's true or not, but our town assessor came to us and told us how they derive the values, and they do look at homes that have sold, and the value apparently, according to the assessor, is greater when you have solar panels. It's a more desirable home, apparently. I don't know. I've not bought a home since '94, so I'm just not sure. But that's why it is important to recognize, as Tom had suggested earlier, that it isn't a tax on the solar panel. It's the value of your home that's gone up because of the panels. So the discussion for tonight is that you'd like that exemption, and so that could be taken right off the top of it, and you wouldn't have that burden anymore.
Okay. And then I'd just like to share, I guess, some thoughts. I do think that it's kind of backwards to look at it in terms of a loss of revenue by exempting it from taxes, just for the fact that people, younger families, people that have more of I think the people that you would want in a town would be interested in solar panels and would avoid a town that doesn't support them. And in that sense, it would actually lower the property value of houses in the community, because less demand, less the prices would go down from that. So I think that's something worth keeping in mind. And then the other thing I just wanted to share was, after I got solar panels, I refinanced with Wells Fargo, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company that definitely knows how to get as much money as they can when they can, and they had no interest in solar panels adding any value to my home. My home did not go up a penny because of my solar panels when I refinanced. So I would say that there is no data, and if you look, I'm sure the town assessor tried their best, but if you look, there really is no data to back up $600, even $300 or anything. So it's really kind of made up from everything I can tell. And then finally, I guess for the folks that don't even own their panels, I would say that it almost sounds to me like somebody, if somebody comes to your house and parks a Mercedes-Benz worth $80,000 in your driveway, that doesn't make your house go up $80,000. So I think I can't wrap my head around the logic there. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. No, absolutely. Eileen?
Obviously, everybody has the right to say anything that they want, but I just want to say that I don't think that there's anybody on the council that is opposed to an exemption. So I just wanted to kind of give you their perspective. They're holding the public hearing so that they can hear from you, but it will be the people's decision on, whether it happens or not. So I just wanted to give you that perspective.
Put it on the ballot.
Did you?
Let us decide.
Hi.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
Okay, I gotta use these. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ned Reynolds. I sell commercial solar projects for a company called Revision Energy, which has an office in Brentwood, New Hampshire, that employs over 50 people. I'm also a resident and a 3-term city councilor in Portsmouth, over in Portsmouth, which of course is one of the, I've got a number of 135 other municipalities in the state that either fully or partially exempt the value of solar equipment from the property tax base. This is a list that I downloaded from the DRA database earlier today. So I'm certainly not here to suggest what you should do from the perspective of an official in another town. That wouldn't be helpful. I'm obviously speaking as a representative of the New Hampshire-based solar energy system designer and installer. As I said, we employ over 50 people in our Brentwood office. We installed 380 solar and related technology projects throughout the state in the last year. I've been in the energy policy field for over 20 years, and I'm now proud to work for this company that is an employee-owned company, that's deploying this technology in the marketplace every day. So working in the energy policy arena, as I have for nearly 2 decades in New Hampshire, or even if you don't work in the field but you just kind of follow the news, at least 2 or 3 times a year you hear some article, some event. I mean, it actually happens to be New Hampshire Energy Week this year, so there was a big who's who breakfast up in Concord this morning of anybody who's anybody in the energy policy field, and I'm sure once again it was lamented that New Hampshire has, New Hampshire, here in New England, the Northeast, we have some of the highest electric rates in the country, right? Why is this? Because we have 0 native fossil fuel resources. Most of the energy we use is imported. 70 cents of every dollar we spend on oil, gasoline, natural gas, and electricity from the fossil fuel-fired regional grid leaves the state. For that reason, public policy at the state and local level should encourage and support in every way possible the installation and use of distributed and renewable energy resources. It's conservative it's prudent, it's thrifty to be as self-reliant as possible, to provide for yourself with the resources you control and the resources you have. We have solar energy in New Hampshire. Fun fact for this evening, New Hampshire lies along the same latitude as the French Riviera. So solar energy does work here in New Hampshire, and the success of my company and other companies and the fact that folks in this town, 92, if I can believe the number that I read in the paper, notwithstanding what's been said, have already shown that it does work. And thousands of homeowners and hundreds of businesses, institutions, other municipal governments across the state have already recognized and embraced the value of solar energy and the contribution that it makes to multiple widely held policy goals like energy independence, environmental quality, which of course has been mentioned, clean air, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that are warming the planet, economic security and prosperity. Homeowners and businesses who make the investment in solar equipment are doing it for their own reasons. Sure, many have been mentioned here. But the reason that, from a policy perspective, you should ask, why are we not aligned with so many other cities and towns in the state, and why are we not in alignment with the policy that the legislature made several years ago when they enabled local governments to give this tax property, to exempt solar property and other renewable energy property from taxation. Why? Why did they do that? Because folks who make that investment, and homeowners and businesses who make that investment in renewable energy equipment, are producing benefits for everyone else in town and in the state, in terms of reduced stress on the local utility grid, which reduces the need for infrastructure upgrades, which everyone pays for on their utility bill. Right? That goes into rates. The notion that exempting renewable energy property from property tax would unfairly burden the rest of taxpayers in town ignores that fact. But that is just the infrastructure costs, which, as I mentioned, of course, are one component of rates. The cost of the energy that goes onto the grid that we all buy are a huge component of rates. And a study just a few years ago by the independent system operator of New England, the grid operator, found that on the hottest day of the year, the day of peak demand on the grid, that the contribution of solar energy to the region's electricity supply that day in a single hour of peak demand saved ISO New England ratepayers, all ratepayers in the region, collectively $20 million. That's because, at least in part, it's because solar energy, of course, produces its peak output during, coincident with peak demand on the grid. So those values, that value, that reduction in demand on the grid and to the price of energy on the grid for everyone, produces that value for everyone. So Merrimack, in closing, Merrimack and the entire region, the entire state would be better off the more solar energy systems you have in town. But as the previous speaker mentioned, you're not going to get them if you discourage them through this, fairly arbitrary, as also been mentioned, way of assessing them, which then increases, the property tax bill for people who have them or are considering them. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
What was that number again, the updated number?
Of towns?
135.
135. And I'm happy to give you this because I downloaded it to my computer.
Somebody had mentioned 135 earlier. I had written it right down here. So.
So it's either fully or partially, and it has notes on the on the side that tell what each town does.
Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question and insight for best practices in your business.
Yeah.
3 years ago, my wife and I we looked at solar, and I'm not going to mention the company's name, but they had talked about how Merrimack had the exemption, to which I had to politely tell the salesperson that we don't have the exemption. So my question to you is, when you go into the other 104 communities in New Hampshire that don't have the exemption, is that part of your talking point to make sure that they're aware that what they're entering into, whether they're buying or leasing, that they're not going to be able to participate in RSA 7262?
Yes, we track it very closely.
Okay.
And we certainly advise would-be customers of, the benefits and the costs involved. So yes.
Peter?
It's kind of, it's not directly pertaining to taxes, but what exactly is a solar panel made of, without getting into real deep? But what exactly is a solar panel?
Silicon. Silicon wafer, yeah.
And-
That's the material that does the trick, does the conversion.
But the other
And
parts
course,
of it, the components of it. are
aluminum
what?
frame and.
What are the other components of a solar panel?
Well, so the solar panel is again, silicon wafers that come in cells and assembled into a module, aluminum frame, transistor in the back, wiring. Another component is the inverter. That's a very important component that does the work of turning the current produced, which is direct current DC, turning DC into AC. So that's the box that hangs on the garage wall, say, or the basement wall. That's it. It's really a
Now,
pretty
does
simple.
a company such as yours, sir, do they make the?
No, we procure panels. We're part of a procurement collaborative that we actually helped found that does, that sources different companies' panels. There are a lot of different manufacturers. They come in different sizes and different capacities. That's another reason why assessing a panel at a flat rate of anything is really not an accurate. It's really not an accurate way to do it because
I don't know if that's the
You
way
know.
we do it or not. I've not heard that number. It may be.
I don't know. We weren't here to talk about that, so
there
I
can
wasn't
be a
prepared to answer
panel
how
that's-
we.
A panel someone bought 10 years ago maybe have been a 240 watt panel when they bought it, so it puts out X, and in 10 years it now puts
It's
out a
down,
little less.
right.
But
Well-
somebody buys a panel that puts out 370 watts today.
Right, and that's why when we did have that conversation with our assessor, there's a depreciation that occurs apparently because of what you're just speaking to,
Yeah.
and so on.
There is
So-
projected output depreciation, which is all calculated
Yeah.
into the value of the system, but it's just another reason why assessment of a system is pretty problematic.
Yeah. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Ned. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Good evening.
Hi there, I'm Rudy Basilmans from 174 Natticook Road.
Hi, Rudy.
Hi. And so the DRA database is actually not up to date. I actually did some checking to see what kinds of towns and cities were exempt or exempting the property increase for tax on solar, and a number of them are not correct in the database. I think there's a big difference between the way they're taxed and handled in the southern part of the states and in the bigger cities in New Hampshire than it is in the northern part of the state. So you may want to look at that when you look at that list. I have to admit, I'm an idiot. I came from Nashua. We moved here a year ago, put solar in, and then we're shocked to find out that even though New Hampshire says you can exempt them, Nashua is exempting them and Merrimack's not. So that sort of destroyed a lot of the value for me. When you talk about the value of the house, I think that what you have to figure is that the utilities these days are actually reducing those benefits dramatically. Now they're not giving you credit for the distribution. They're making lots of changes so that they can save money themselves, make more money. And so in the future, I don't think you're going to have nearly as many people even interested in solar. And with the tax on top of it and the reduced benefit of the solar because of the changes in utility costs, it's not worth it in Merrimack. And so the problem is that it is an eyesore. People complain about it sometimes. I know I see some, and you're looking at them, what a stupid system they have up there. It looks really bad. When you sell, there's a fear of an obligation that the person has to a lease, or fear about what's going to happen with maintenance or whatever, because they don't understand solar panels. And of course, you've got the tax here, and the return on investment is just not there. So it's actually embarrassing to have solar, I have to admit it. Anybody who goes to my house and asks me how I'm doing on my solar, I have to admit that it's hardly paying off because of the tax situation. So now, of course, I can't hide from it because it's sitting on my house. So if they come to the house, I see it. So I think that the proper thing to do here is actually to reduce the tax on any house that has solar, because it's harder to sell, because it's an eyesore, because you're not getting much value for the savings you're getting. I think you actually should consider reducing that. And I think that if you were to get to $63,000 or $64,000 worth of tax revenue and distribute it among everyone in Merrimack, it would cost about $6 a year. That would be 0.06 increase in our tax bill. I think we can probably handle that. I'd be willing to double that and pay twice that as my personal assessment to make up for a few other houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy.
Hello, my name is Glen Nakamoto. I live at 83 Tinker Road, and I'm probably the one that started some of the petitions back in 2017 and even earlier. The problem I ran into was that my wife came down with cancer twice, so both times got severely interrupted in my signature collection phase, especially in the wintertime when I was trying to keep her isolated, from cold germs and stuff. Anyway, I wanted to talk about the fact that we installed solar panels about 3.5 years ago.
I'm sorry, there's this microphone just died. I'm sorry about this. Do you mind just switching over to this microphone over here?
Okay, sure.
Sorry about that.
No problem. All right, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we put in solar panels back in about 3.5 years ago. And I knew at the time there wasn't an exemption. However, for me, it still made sense because, one, I was able to afford to pay cash up front, so I didn't have to pay for interest. Two, the state incentives were $3,750 versus $1,000. And three, Eversource was still giving us the full retail payment for net metering. So those made it very attractive where I could really consider the fact that I could get my, quote, payback, say, in about 10 years or so. However, today, if you had to buy the same system with today's prices at, say, about a 4.5% interest on the loan, I estimate that with the savings that we've had data collected for 3 years now, my payback period would be around, roughly about 12 years. Now, that's still not too bad, but that's not taking into consideration paying the additional assessments. If I then add the assessment that I've had for the past 3 years, it would take 18 years to break even with actual data. Now, if you present these kinds of numbers to a normal person, given that the solar panel has a 20-year life, it doesn't make a lot of sense to consider going solar, at least not through this kind of payment process. Now, when I did it, the incentives were much better. We had the same 30% federal tax incentive. And also, there was an opportunity then that there was a bank, several banks, that offered a situation where if I were willing to give them the $3,750 state incentive initially, once I got it after submitting it, and the 30% tax after I received that tax refund, I could basically get solar without paying anything up front. So it'd be very similar to a lease arrangement, except that you owned it after, say, about 12 years or 15 years, whatever the term was. So back then, it was attractive. Now, however, though, with the only 1,000 state credit and with a 67% retail payback. In other words, I buy electricity for $1. If I sell it back to Eversource, they only give me 67 cents. I'm grandfathered to 2040, but anyone new is not. Okay, so as a result, right now we might have roughly at 100 houses. I think I read somewhere out of the 9,000 that Merrimack has. So anyone starting out now to consider buying it, the numbers don't add up if you don't pay up front. So as a result, the addition of the tax burden on the property tax adds 6 years to that recovery period, which really makes it pretty much untenable. And therefore, it's going to be a huge damper for encouraging the use of, and I know at one point, I think in the 14 February council meeting minutes, there was concern about the loss of tax revenue. Well, if you have those kinds of impediments in there, there is no tax revenue for something that people aren't going to buy. So that's the other thing. And one last thing I wanted to quickly mention. For the last 3 years, my assessment on the solar panels haven't dropped to $1, even though the performance on that is steadily dropping year by year. It's only maybe 1 or 2%. But I honestly thought that, over time, that they would be reducing my assessments. And the first year I got my assessment, I went back and I tried to get an abatement. I showed them, this is what it costs. I showed them, you could buy it for this price. And my assessment was significantly more than what you, quote, go out there and buy it for. But I think, like you said, the assessor said, well, if we go out there and we look at a house that has a comparable kind of square footage with a solar panel, this is what they can get. But what they don't tell you is that that's true, but they're in a town where they're not taxing, the solar panels, because that is a annual tax that keeps growing, or at least keeps being added on. So instead of having a $30,000 solar panel, I could buy an $80,000 increasing house without the solar panel and have the same net payment. So that's where the assessment process, I think, like people have said, is a bit broken. So,
thank you, Glenn. We appreciate it. Bill, did you have a question?
Just, Eileen, can you confirm for me that the process that Lauren, just to address Mr. Nakamoto's concern, when a person applies for an abatement, they're looking at other comps when they're evaluating the abatement. They're looking at comps in Merrimack. They're not looking at other communities, correct?
As I said, we weren't here tonight to talk about that, so
Okay.
I'm not really sure how exactly what the process is for assessing them. I do know that it is $6 a panel, and that I'm sorry, what is it? What did you say it was? 600. And then Lauren said that it goes down, it gets depreciated, but we only change the value every 5 years, so a person would only see it in the 5th year.
Okay, so the change is only occurring once every 5 years?
I guess the point that I'm getting at is that if you take a house like Mr. Nakamoto's and you compare it to other houses, that if you take solar panels off the equation and you do comps with some of the other houses to do an abatement, the square footage of the roof might be different. The number of panels might be different from one house as opposed to Mr. Nakamoto's house or to some of the other people's house. So it would be difficult for, at least from where I sit, for the assessor to get what would be an appropriate comp just in evaluating the abatement process for the square footage for solar panels.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It does. What I think
But
we're
I
going to
think
have to
it's a question
do
for Lauren.
is, for me, when this comes to a conclusion at some point in the not too distant future, I think we should probably have another conversation about it so that we can possibly have some efforts made on how we want to tackle larger operations and so on and so forth. So I think those type of questions is something we should address with the assessor or if necessary at some point in the near future. Peter?
I know the town manager addressed it as this going to a warrant article. That's not our only option, though, right? Could this council address this issue
Yes, you can.
directly?
We could put forward an ordinance, yes.
Okay.
Not
and
tonight, no.
No, not tonight. There's a lot that needs to go into this. But my concern is we're asking folks to throw together warrant articles. When a lot of the experts are sitting within town government as to, what would be the right way to go and how to address it, especially with, commercial properties and so forth who are maybe planning on putting in large solar arrays. But I guess my point being is that maybe this council should actually move on it within the next year, within the next couple of months or so, and to look at it only because right now it's a $60,000 impact, and the longer we go on, it becomes a larger impact possibly. So, to me, I'm putting it out here to this council is, do we want to wait till April 2020, when I think that there's a lot been said about, should we have a cap on it? I think that's important and so forth, and I think that maybe, that's a discussion that we should go with. And so that's just one person's opinion. I'd like to hear the rest of my council members' opinions on that.
Actually, I said that just before you did. I think we have to do that. I think it would be better for us to steer the ship so that we can be more assured that some of the greater impacts that are around, that will happen.
Because earlier, you discussed going to a warrant article and so forth for next year.
Well, I personally still want it on the ballot, but I think I'd rather steer that ship than go.
I'm just saying, I agree with you steering the ship, but I'm wondering if, instead of waiting till next year, maybe we move on it, where, to me, it doesn't seem like it's as big an impact.
Right, I think we will have that discussion, I think, and we should, at some point shortly, have that discussion. That way we can wrap up the public hearing here, but I think you're right. Barbara?
Yeah, I'm going to back up with what Pete just said. It just seems wrong to me that these folks brought this to everyone's attention 3 years ago, and we're still sitting here talking about it, and there's been no relief. So I would like to see something, at least maybe intermediate, and then put it on a ballot whenever the earliest possible date that is. Does it have to wait for the April 2020 ballot?
Unless we do the ordinance. We can do the ordinance prior
I mean,
to that.
maybe what we could do is work with the assessors and actually come up with what would be a fair.
Right, I think that's too much, too many questions that can't be answered tonight.
Agreed.
And
I just think 3 years is long enough.
Fair enough, but it was in anticipation of, of the petition coming forward, and the timing wouldn't work because of dates that are prescribed, so. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Nakamoto.
Maybe I'll just add one more thing.
Sure.
You just remembered. I've been in Merrimack now for about 5 years and lived in East Wakefield prior to that for about 10 years and Massachusetts for 20 years before that. But I also spent a fair amount of time in Hawaii. And one of the things I learned out there, they are very far advanced in terms of solar there. And they have this whole concept of distributed generation that they were just talking about, where rooftop solar, community solar, and the grid all have to work together in a coordinated fashion, because the utility folks, know that the writing's on the wall that revenue is going to start dropping. But we have to really continue to rely on the infrastructure. We're going to get cloudy days, night occurs, so it's not going to go away. But at the same time, they don't want to lose revenue. So in New Hampshire, there's a thing called the New Hampshire State Energy Strategy document that talks about distributed generation, which looks at a partnership between local homeowners with rooftop solar, with the town and communities that support large-scale projects, solar projects, and the utility providers. Now, in Hawaii, one of the things I did, since I traveled there a lot, was to actually get involved in talking with some of the folks out there to see what those partnerships look like. And one of the things that you discover is that, like, one of the places I visit a lot is an island called Kauai. And on that island, on a sunny day, they generate 77% of their electricity purely from solar. And that's really kind of a remarkable thing. And they're averaging probably about 8 or 9 cents per kilowatt hour, where if they pay from fossil fuel, it's over almost 38 cents, which is double what we pay here. So they're highly incentivized. They get payback in 4 to 5 years,
right,
compared to 12 to 15 years. Okay. Despite that, the Honolulu Council in 2009 approved tax exemption for solar panels, even though there really probably wasn't a whole lot of need. But in 2009, the solar penetration on rooftop was less than 1%, sort of like what we have here. In less than 10 years, they've hit a saturation point of 10%. But with that 10% came this distributed generation notion, where the partnerships have started to grow, battery power is starting to come into place. So there's a significant future path that we can learn from places that have adopted. California is also, and Germany as well. So this is, I think, a trend that's going to be coming, and the more we can sort of enable it here within our community, I think the better off we'll be, as a progressive community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman and members of the council. My name is Ravi Sampath. I live in 14 Abbey Road. I moved to Merrimack 4 years ago from upstate New York, where for about 15 years I had solar panels in upstate, and now I've had it here for 4 years. I'm a very staunch environmentalist, and I'm not going to talk about it because everybody else has. I don't want to repeat myself. And especially since the council, everybody raised their hand and said, we are for this amendment to get rid of this assessment, not taxes. I want to make you guys happy.
Thank you.
But I want to say something that people skirted around. And I was going to talk about solar panels as a capital investment, but they've already said it's going to be depreciated, though every 5 years. That stinks. Because if you look at IRS code, it's depreciated every year. So that's a flaw you need to fix immediately. You don't need a ballot. You can pass the council and have your town assessor change it every year. Okay? At least you owe us that much. The other thing I want to say is Mr. Albert beat me to it with his amendment. He proposed that you guys take action. I was going to say, if you're going to put this to a ballot, it's got to come with your full backing, saying you support it 100%. So there's no ambiguity in which direction it's going to be going, whether there's a cap or no cap. That I'm going to leave it to you because you have finances to worry about. So I'm not going to suggest, but my preference would be no cap. And if you want to put a cap, I would suggest that corporate, which is probably the bigger money giver for you folks, they depreciate heavily, even faster than linear. So you can make exemption for those people who are depreciating at a non-linear rate. So I'm looking at all the financial stuff here, not the environmental, which I wholly support what everybody else has said. I even have a pellet stove. Somebody said wood-burning stoves are bad, which is true, but pellet stove come from sawdust from the floor. So if you go into the energy cycle, it's a whole lot better than burning wood stove, so I have both in my house. The other thing is, we're talking about assessing the value of the home based on the cost of the solar panel. That doesn't return a dime to me. It's a solar power which varies, so that you could come and monitor my power generation and assess the assessment of property increase based on the energy generated. Like if I pay a $80,000 car and it gives me 10 miles per gallon, you shouldn't tax me, in my humble opinion. From an environment point of view, you can tax the 80,000, but from travel point of view, it shouldn't be 80,000, but the 10 miles per gallon it gives me. So the assessment base itself is wrong. Okay, suppose somebody gypped me and made me pay more for the solar panel, I shouldn't be, the property shouldn't be accessed more value. So thank you for giving me the time, appreciate it.
Thank you very
I
much.
hope you pass the bill tomorrow.
Very good. Thank you.
I'll make it quick. I had one concern that came to me. This is Rudy Baselman's 174 Natticook Road. And the fear is that if you go to ballot on this, we're going to have about 100 solar owners, probably another 400 or 500 people who want solar, and about 8,500 people who are fearful that their taxes are going to go up. They won't realize that they are going to go up by 0.06%. So they'll just hear it's going up and they'll say no. So I think if you want to take it to ballot, we should just shut it down because I don't think it's going to pass. Thanks.
Thank you.
If I may, I'll be brief. I just wanted to step up and make two more points, and very much appreciate your remarks so far, and that you're inclined to do something about the assessment. My first point that I wanted to make is I would urge you not to adopt an exemption with a cap, because for the reasons I spoke about, the public benefit, the benefit to your reduced stress on your local grid, your local substations, your distribution wires, as well as the public environmental benefits, are in direct proportion to the size of the system. So a business that wants to put a 50 kilowatt or 75 kilowatt system, which would be a couple of $100,000 in cost to put on, and it's going to produce significant energy for that business. It's going to produce significant public benefit. So I would urge no cap. The second reason the second thing I wanted to mention is for that local business, as I said when I introduced myself, I sell commercial scale solar systems. So I'm scouting in towns throughout the state for businesses with significant energy use, with significant building size, and I'm pitching, and successfully pitching, a solar system to them as a sound business strategy for them to lower their energy costs, to make their energy costs more predictable, to insulate themselves from future increases in electricity prices, and make themselves more competitive. And from a local economic development perspective, I would suggest that you want that in your town. You want to maximize the ability of businesses that are in your town to make themselves as competitive as they can, lower their energy costs, increase their security. So again, I would urge you not to have any cap on the exemption, but to fully embrace solar as a sound economic development and environmental strategy for your town. Thanks.
Thank you. Bill?
Ned, could you answer a question?
Yes.
A couple of questions, please. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it fair to assume that you, at your home, you have solar?
At my home, I don't, because my home is, the axis of my roof is north-south, and I have some fairly large trees, so my home is not suitable for it.
Okay, so let me draw upon your business experience with your clients. Is it fair to say the majority, well, what is the percentage of your clients that buy versus lease?
Oh, boy. I have not been selling commercial solar systems for that long, so I don't have a good database.
That's fair.
It's a far better value to buy than to lease. When you lease, you're basically someone else putting up the capital, taking a lot of the value.
So is it also fair to say that if I buy, come January following year, I can depreciate and fill out whatever necessary IRS tax form I can to depreciate the value of that, versus where I lease it, somebody else owns it, I don't get that benefit of depreciating?
Correct. Whoever owns the system gets both of the significant tax benefits on that go to the purchase of solar. Someone mentioned the investment tax credit, the 30% right off the capital cost, and then the other benefit is a depreciation. It's actually accelerated bonus depreciation, which all comes in the first year.
Okay.
So, yeah, whoever buys it, whoever puts out the capital, gets that back. That's for commercial.
It's commercial. But if anybody can answer the question on residential, I certainly would.
There's no depreciation. Yeah, just the same, no depreciation.
Even if you buy
Invest.
Yeah. Actually, if you're going to speak, you're going to have to come up here if Ned can answer it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for residential, it's much more simple. There's a $1,000 application that you can file with the state of New Hampshire as a direct incentive. And then there is a 30% federal tax credit that's available as a tax credit on your income taxes in the first year. And that's 30% this year, 20%, 26% next year, 22% the following year, and then down to 10%. So
It's being
get on it.
sunsetted. It's being sunsetted.
Okay, thank you. Chris, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ned.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Bishop. I live on 2 Pine Tree Lane, and I'm one of the 100 people or so that have solar. And I just want to say, I live on the corner of Joppa and Pine Tree, so I get a lot of traffic going to the dump. And if I'm out there, well, past 3 years I've had solar panels. And if I'm out there sitting there watching the world go by, like I like to do, people will often stop, probably a few dozen over the last 3 years, and they've asked about the solar panels, and they said, "Oh, why'd you get them?" I said, "Because it's the right thing to do." And they said, well, I tell them all the benefits that everybody has said here, and they said, "Okay, I'm interested." I said, "Well, wait a minute. The assessor has decided to call this a home improvement," which I'm not sure it truly is, and I'm taxed. My tax bill went out. I'm not taxed on solar panels, I've been finding out. And they said, "Oh, never mind." So perhaps we would have more people getting the solar panels, just on my little sitting out there watching the world go by, and talking about it. Maybe more people in this town would have solar panels, and frankly, there's a lot of negatives about being in this town. There's too much traffic, the tolls, PFAS. It doesn't make sense that we want to be a progressive community and have more solar panels, more eco-friendly, look into geothermal for the larger corporations to save energy, and it just makes sense to me, but I'm not a rocket scientist, but and I found out that the tax flow is $63,000, which doesn't seem to me that it's a big impact on the town, but the portion of taxes I'm paying means a lot to me, and that money that I'm paying for further taxes, perhaps I could use it to make better improvements on my home. I could fix up my basement, redo the bathroom, redo the kitchen, things like that. That would actual home improvements, not having the so-called unsightly panels. So that's just my 2 cents of having the panels. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Natalia Bayramova, 26 Crossroads Path. I just want to comment on one point. I'm happy that you guys are kind of realizing that assessment was maybe a little bit off, and I think Mrs. Cabanel said something that it's up to the people to vote on the exemption, but yet it wasn't up to the people to vote on the assessment. So, who knows? If that was put on the ballot, maybe actually wouldn't have passed. So, but what I also wanted to mention, and there's still some new people, that meeting 2 years ago, which was just me, and it was a very long meeting. And the reason why it was a very long meeting, because there was a lot of discussion of there was a mistake made in, in assessing nonprofits, I don't know, YMCA and churches and everything. And so I think maybe that played a part, because there was, it was a significant issue. And then we had that also, the extra assessment, and we're like, oh, great, we might, at least we'll set off that a little bit. So maybe that's why back then, the council, whoever was there, didn't look as deep into what that assessment actually meant. So maybe now that you guys have all that extra information, maybe it would help you really to kind of look at the assessment and see, what it's really coming from and how it's done. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Bill Dallas, 18 Handsome Drive, Merrimack. I don't have solar, okay, and I don't mind paying the extra tax that I would be assessed for the exemption. We're going to be downsizing, so it makes no sense for me to put in solar. But the next house I will, and it won't be in Merrimack if there's a tax. We have no kids in school, so we are paying more tax than we should, maybe. But I would hope that this council not wait for a ballot, a warrant article in 2020. I would hope you do something shortly. Either get the assessment looked at by the assessor to say, you know, maybe it is a little bit too high. Maybe it can be halved, maybe it could be wiped out, because everything I've heard, it doesn't increase the value of your house when you sell it. It's just, they're there. So I hope this council does something with the assessment, or maybe do an ordinance for a year and then put it out for a ballot. But I hope that an ordinance actually comes about and stays in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Dick Josephson, 4 Woodward Road. My experiences with solar. Eversource charges me about 8 cents a kilowatt hour. Solar City charges me 13. And I keep a running tab of how much each one's costing. And I try to keep the two the same at the end of the year, which means that I turn my solar off periodically. And I get a phone call from Solar City, said, "You turned the solar off." I said, "I know. It's not broken, I turned it off." "But why?" I said, "Because of the cost." "Oh, okay." And that's my little to-do. But the one big benefit I see to solar, when you have snow in the wintertime, and a couple days later, the sun comes out and you hear, whoof, as all the snow comes off, I don't have to get it raked anymore. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. All right, if anybody further would like to address council, please feel free to step up. Otherwise, seeing no one, I close the public hearing at 9:02. And thank you very, very much for your input. We absolutely appreciate it, and I suspect we'll be having a discussion about it sometime in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you now.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, legislative updates from our state representatives.
Mr. Chairman, could you
Yes,
pause
we'll-
for 2 minutes, please?
Yeah, we will. Just take a minute here. Okay, we'll recess for 5 minutes. All right. Take care, guys. All right, we're going to come back to order here. Hello?
Yep.
Coming out of recess at 9:08. Eileen, do you think, after this discussion, we'd like to, I don't know if I'm speaking for the whole council, but what I'd like to see is us try and pull information together. I'd like to know, I'd really like to know the value on our large solar users and, you know, the value of the companies that are now using solar. I'd like to know that impact because I'd like to start drawing a point where I'd have an understanding if a cap would be necessary or not.
We have one company
That's it.
that has solar. We have one
Company in town.
in town that has solar.
There are businesses on that list.
No commercial, I meant. Okay, so if it's,
All right, Peter?
I guess I'd like to see is, with the input from you, Eileen, your staff, and the assessors are, some options on what we could do ordinance-wise that would alleviate some of the issues with these folks, because to me, it's common sense that and I feel like this council, it's our responsibility. They elected us to do something, and I don't necessarily, feel we need to wait till next April. So I think that maybe we get some options together, what we can look at, what might be feasible with the help of yourself and your staff.
Eileen, yes.
so I assume what you're talking about is that we should look at the assessing practices for how they determine what the value is of the assessments.
Again.
So what we would need to do is have Lauren come in and you actually sit down and have the discussion with her about how that all takes place.
Yeah.
But aside from that, if you wanted to go through the ordinance process, there's one way to go through it, which is just to go through the ordinance process and exempt. So I think, so there's one that you can have the discussion with Lauren about the validity of the assessments or her method, or you can move forward to exempt yourselves.
And just to be able to jump on that, I'll try to speak up. I'm not against having a discussion, but I think it should be a discussion first, rather than developing an ordinance. We should talk about whether we want to. That's my only suggestion.
Yeah, and absolutely. And, this is not something you just charge into, but I think that these folks have waited 3 years. I think that waiting, to push it off till, next April, it just seems that, hey, we were voted to do something. This seems to me an issue that we can handle, or we should handle.
I just don't want it to be implied, which I guess maybe I'm reacting and I shouldn't be. But I'm getting the implication it was the lack of action by this council. That it's been 3 years, and I reject that.
No.
I'm just suggesting, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That 3 years has gone by, and is it a result of this council inaction? And I reject that. Okay, so if we can start with, let's start from the perspective of, let's evaluate, and let's determine about the possible options we have. I have absolutely no problem with that. But I need to voice that we're starting from here, not based upon something that was not done in the past. Because there were options that were not taken in the past.
Agreed.
By the public.
Agreed, and there was no intention on my part.
Okay, then that's fine.
To criticize any prior or current council members.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe we look at revisiting this topic in a month and a half, I don't know.
And Yes, and then I'll have my,
Yeah, no, it was very clear. I mean, life got in the way, you know. And then I think that it also happens that the public thinks that when they bring something to the council, they brought it to the council, you know. And even though they may hear us say, you need to do X, Y, and Z, you know, 6 months from now, they don't really remember it, you know, because I brought it to the council. So, you know, no, I don't think that's it at all. But at the same time, you know, they've gone around with this for a couple of times.
I think there's an option that we should, absolutely right, we should discuss it.
Yep.
And talk about the options. I think one point I will make, and I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to do it. The argument about assessed value is almost moot, and not for the following reason. All those towns that I'm looking at is 100% exemption from the assessed value. All those towns agreed that there is an assessed value or you wouldn't need an exemption.
Correct.
Okay?
That's correct.
So I think we can debate about what the percentage is, have Lauren explain to us upon what basis and what amount the assessment is. But all those towns assess solar, otherwise they wouldn't need the exemption. So when we have a discussion with Lauren, we should get into what how you do it, what percentage, depreciation, and all that stuff.
right. And at this point, I suspect she has some comps within our town
More
now.
so, yeah.
Why would she, with a couple years under her belt?
I talked to her today, and I don't think she does.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Couldn't hear you, but that's. Yeah, no,
I
it's-
talked to her today, and she said that she charges it based on some kind of I don't,
Standard, yeah.
some kind of standard, and I wish that somebody had told me to bring her, because I would
Well,
have
no,
brought
because it
her.
wasn't for tonight, and I thought it
That
wasn't for
wasn't what the
tonight
public
anyhow,
hearing is
because
supposed to be
there's
about.
just too much to go on, and that's why we would normally ask what the pleasure of the council was, and I kind of wrapped it up.
Procedurally, we're way out of bounds.
Yes.
Way out of bounds.
So that's why I just, Peter's suggestion, I'd like to start with Lauren and find out from her angle how we come up with it. I'm curious why we wouldn't have some comparables right now with home sales with solar. So we'll do that. And all right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have a couple of points, and I hope my colleagues will indulge me. I agree with you, Councilor Harrington. We've been talking about this since 2016, when a certain corporation came to us looking to do a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, because of certain federal grants and tax credits that they were going to see if they were going to build a solar array on their particular property. And at the time, they were supposed to present to us, and that individual never showed up. So we were given all this documentation. We had no presentation, and it felt very hurried at that particular time. We voted against it, which I felt was prudent, felt it was absolutely prudent. In 2017, we actually did vote to put an exemption on the warrant article for 2017. It was for 50% of an exemption capped at $5,000. February 16, 2017, it passed 3-2. But Chief Courier at that particular time had raised the concern regarding specific fire and safety standards as it related to it. So I don't know who made the motion to reconsider, but a motion to reconsider prevailed 4-1, and that request to put it on the ballot was redacted at that particular time. So to say that we haven't really addressed this particular issue, I think we've been on the periphery just a little bit. I think we've been exposed to a lot of different information, but at the same particular time, even though this law has been in existence since 1975, it's only seemed to have been promulgated to municipalities in our state within the last 10 to 15 years. The third point that I wanted to make goes directly to the assessed value. And Mr. Nakamoto made a very good point, and it's the point that I quite candidly I think is very salient. We have 97 parcels, homes, they're probably homes, that have a solar array on their property. If as he explained, if he goes to apply for an abatement, how are they going to comp something close to reduce his solar array? How can he adequately provide, how can he adequately apply for an abatement if there are not other houses that are similar to his that allows the assessor to make a qualified opinion as to whether or not he qualifies for an abatement? So I think we cherish the abatement process in this town where people have the opportunity to apply because they feel that we overassessed on one particular thing or another particular thing. And, you know, the assessor, you know, rules yes or no based on those particular comps. But those are based on the comps that, you know, absolutely. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, we've taken the stance that we're going to do our due diligence, we're going to get our data, and once we have our data, we're going to hopefully be able to make an informed decision as to how we want to proceed on this issue. Now, getting into the philosophical question of whether we do an ordinance versus putting it on the warrant article, that's a topic but that's a philosophical conversation. But I think from this council's perspective, I think, and I've done a lot of research. Eileen's helped me out, and Lawrence helped me out, and I've been very grateful for that. You know, and I've tried to pass along. Hopefully, that information's been disseminated down to you. But in the same token, I think we need to really get down to the brass tacks and figure out how does this, you know, what are the implications as it relates residentially versus somebody that owns a business that wants to do a commercial solar array on their property. So I think as we're looking to move forward, I think it does behoove to have a substantive conversation. Because I think we would be doing the community a disservice if we made a motion to do some type of ordinance to appease people. And I don't think that's right. And I don't think, you know, we're a body that does appeasement. I think we've shown ourselves to be prudential, thoughtful, and pragmatic in how we approach the affairs of this particular community. So, I expect moving forward we will have something for the community, and whatever the mode of transportation it is to go forward will be a topic of conversation for another time.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Yes, Eileen.
Would you like me to have Lauren come to the next council meeting?
Please.
Finley?
Yes, whatever fits her schedule, it, you know, can be next meeting or the following.
Okay.
Whatever make it work.
Okay.
And the one last piece, and I apologize for usurping the conversation, but I had a conversation with the assessor in the city of Manchester, and he made a very interesting point to me, is that there are a variety of different assessing software that is out there, and you have some communities that don't have the ability to assess solar based on what's on their software. You have communities such as ours, Avatar, which obviously has the software to be able to do that particular assessment. So, as he was explaining to me, Manchester historically, and I don't mean to compare Manchester to Merrimack, and I apologize to the viewing audience, but he made the point of saying that, you know, in the past, if people had solar, we just weren't valuing it. We weren't, you know, even though they may have applied for an exemption, they were just giving the exemption, but they weren't physically doing anything on the card. And he says the 2021 reval is going to be a very different story because they're changing software, and that software is now going to have the ability to assess a value for that particular solar component. So I think you have to look at what the individual communities have been using for assessing throughout the years, and obviously that has driven as to whether or not, you know, the solar component has been on the assessing card or it has not been on the assessing card. And I know it's kind of an esoteric point, but I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Nancy, would you welcome? We'll have our legislative updates.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Nancy Murphy, 20 Renda Lane, currently a state rep for Merrimack. I was going to say I'm happy to be in the presence of so many people who are concerned about our environment, but I think everybody's gone. I do thank them for their efforts to really protect our environment. It's nice to see community members show up like that. On behalf of Representative Rosemarie Rung and my fellow water warriors, Kathy Stack and Wendy Thomas, I want to thank everybody that came to the Merrimack Village District annual meeting on Tuesday evening to vote to approve PFAS filtration of our public wells to protect the health of our community. I know I said it before, and I don't who watches this, and hopefully different people tune in at different times, but I'll say it again, given that New Hampshire is #1 in the nation for pediatric cancer, as well as breast cancer, bladder cancer, and esophageal cancer, and we know PFAS are known to be associated with cancer, thyroid, neurodevelopmental, reproductive, and other health issues, it behooves us to do everything we can to protect our environment and human health, especially for the most vulnerable, children, pregnant women, and those with compromised health to begin with. As victims of an industrial polluter that refuses to acknowledge responsibility for this contamination, it's actually reprehensible that Merrimack residents have to pay to filter these toxic chemicals out of our drinking water in the first place. However, our community's been informed and voted overwhelmingly by a 92% margin to protect ourselves. We'll finally have PFAS-free water because citizens fought for and voted for it. So for everybody that came and supported us, I say thank you. I'd like to thank town council members who've supported our efforts, especially the councilors over here who came to meetings, who've been side by side with us as we've fought this problem for a long time, and to everybody that's been there and backed us. I would like to also thank the MVD commissioners, especially Don Provencher, Wolf Van Schoen, and new Commissioner Ken Ayers for their efforts and support. Merrimack Citizens for Clean Water, clearly, founders Carol Morgan DePiro and co-leaders Laureen Allen and Carol DePiro, members of the Merrimack Citizens for Clean Water core team, community members, residents. It was a long process, but I'm glad we're getting there. The other thing I just wanted to remind community members about is, it was already mentioned, there's our Southern New Hampshire Community PFAS Health Fair, and I would encourage everybody. There's going to be so many different groups of people that can talk about different things, including filtration, advocacy, health issues. There's going to be, I think it'll be a great event, and I do hope people will take advantage and at least stop by sometime between 5 and 8 p.m. And then the last thing I just wanted to say, the bills that we spoke about last week, the ones that I've introduced and the other representatives are actually moving to the State House, to the Senate side of the State House. So I know my bills, the environmental triggers of chronic disease, and then the environmental and health impacts of PFAS have passed on consent in the House without a problem, and they're going to be heard in the Senate next week. And I think the environmental triggers one is happening on Tuesday. So things are moving. I've heard that there seems to be pretty significant support, and I've been told by everybody that it shouldn't have a problem passing either side. So we did really well in the House. I mean, it was a voice consent. So I'm hoping, and I think those things will also help the citizens here and get a sense of health impacts and those things. So that's it. That's all I had.
Can I just ask you a question?
Sure.
Has Clark and the DES ever come up with that new advisory number? I know they were kicking around 38 parts per trillion, and then they said for PFOA, and then they said that they were going to most likely reduce that significantly, and then I never heard another word.
I've not either. That's not to say that he hasn't, but I don't know that it has been changed. I know there was
Didn't they have
Minnesota.
a deadline? No,
It was,
no,
yes.
but didn't they have a deadline,
Yep.
statutory deadline when they had to come up with
Public comments had to
it?
be in by a certain date, and
It had to get into rulemaking by a certain date also.
I'm not sure, so I don't want to misrepresent the specifics. And I know there was.
I'll call him tomorrow.
Yeah, I
I'll
thought
call
it was
him tomorrow.
April, the beginning of April or something that had to happen by, which is why they needed all the input of the science on it. Because I know people still last week were sending updated science to support much lower PFAS. And I know that they were looking at the Minnesota science that was showing that the memory studies that we had suggested be included because that would have dropped the MCLs by 2/3. So I'm certainly hopeful that that was taken into consideration and will impact the numbers we have. So that's it.
Does anybody have anything?
Okay, thank you.
Nancy, thank you very much. Thanks for your patience. All right, next on the agenda, Town Manager Report.
Okay, as many of you have noticed, the water line installation into Watson Park began yesterday and is ongoing. A couple of you contacted me and said, "What the heck's going on? Is the water line?" And the answer was yes, but I had not anticipated that it would be quite such a undertaking. So yes, it has begun. The beach and volleyball courts will be installed in the park this spring. So the beach volleyball courts, I don't mean the beach sorry, it's getting late. On April 2nd, the planning board will begin initial discussion on, do you want to read it? Okay. On a comprehensive overhaul of the town's site plan regulations. Over the past year, community development staff has been working to develop new, more modernized site plan regulations. These new draft regulations are intended to replace the various sections of the subdivision regulations that pertain to site plans. The hope is that by modernizing and clarifying many of the requirements and processes associated with a site plan review, the Merrimack will see both better development and more efficient review by town staff and the planning board. Do you want to say anything about that? Okay. Additionally, and very importantly, the draft regulations have been updated, reviewed, and recommended by the town engineer, and to address the EPA MS4 requirements for stormwater management, and more details will be available through the news and events section of the planning board website on the town's website, planning board webpage on the town's website. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. All right, next item on the agenda is consent agenda, and I'll just read what it is before we move it. It's the acceptance of recommended changes to Chapter 183, Vehicles and Traffic of the Merrimack Town Code to change a yield sign to a stop sign on Daniel Webster Drive pursuant to Charter Article 5.
Move the consent agenda.
Motion by Councilor Boyd, seconded by Barbara. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstain. 5-1-0 with Tom Kenny in the negative. And thank you, Don, just in case. I appreciate it. Right, there could have been a question, so thank you. Right. All righty. That had to be very painful. That's all I can say. All right.
She's involved in her own town. I think she's a selectman in her own town.
She does do
so
something,
she's very involved in this type of activity anyway, so it doesn't bore her to tears like it does some people.
The rare
Not
occasion
me,
that I've sat out
not
there,
me.
I've been very bored, so I just don't.
You probably not boring,
All right, no old business. Under new business, oh no, we've done our new business. So next on the agenda is approval of March 14th, 2019 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, move the town council meeting minutes of Thursday, March 14, 2019, as presented.
Second.
Motion by Bill Boyd and seconded by Councilor Albert.
Did Barbara find anything?
No.
Very good. I'm counting on you guys. Tom?
The, on page 4, where we're discussing, it's page 4 where we're discussing the public hearing on the consideration of changes to Chapter 183. In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places, it says that Chief Roy was representing this information, and by my recollection, it was Don Tomala that we were talking to about the number of cars on the highway and things of that nature.
That's a good catch.
Chief Roy.
Yep.
So I'd like to change all that to to Dawn.
I know, I'm
So
embarrassed.
line 14, 27, 30, 31, and 38 were the ones that I noticed on page 4. I think that was as far as I got to noticing things. That was it. Thank
That's
you.
it? No further changes? I'll call the question. All those in favor of the minutes of March 14th? No,
March 14th.
March 14th. Gosh.
March 14th, Finley.
Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. 501, Pete abstaining. Comments from the press? Comments from the public? Dr. Woods. Good evening.
Long Woods to Arbor Street. I'd like to comment on having observed this council now for 3 of its most recent council meetings. The polite discourse and the polite interaction that the council staff comport themselves with and with the public is refreshing. You're to be, I'll compliment you on it if others don't. And I just wanted you to know that. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like the privilege of making one personal statement.
Please.
This is March 28th. Earlier, Chairman Rothaus mentioned the town elections coming up April 9 on a Tuesday. I'm running for town council, and I'm looking at you people and Nancy, representative. But for the viewing public, I've been involved with a lot of things in the town over a number of years. And I'm asking for your vote. 3 reasons. Woods is saying vote for commitment. Woods is saying vote for experience. And Woods is asking for your vote. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Lon.
Thanks, Lon.
Thanks, Lon.
Nobody further from the public? Comments from the council? Bill?
Very briefly, Representative Murphy stole my thunder, but the health fair, again, I just want to reiterate the health fair from 5 to 8 on April 3rd. A lot of people put a lot of hard work into putting the appropriate professionals in place so that people that have questions and concerns can come to this fair and get their questions answered, or at least be able to get a referral where they can find their answers. So I certainly hope, in light of what our community has experienced over the last couple of years, I certainly hope people will come out, at least engage, walk around, ask some questions, and be a part of the conversation. So I hope to see you there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bill. Any further? Other than real quickly, I have to say happy birthday to my dear mother who turned 86 yesterday. And it's, you can say their age, I guess, when they get up in their 80s. It doesn't matter anymore. But
Something to be
you can
proud of again, right?
So anyhow, thank you. But nothing further?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Boyd, seconded by Barbara. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. 600. Thank you very much.